Australia's National Disability Insurance Scheme costs $46 billion a year. The fraud task force that polices it has recovered $86 million. $86 million against $46 billion. That is not a rounding error. It is a rounding error of a rounding error. This episode is about what happens when you build a system to move money fast and forget to build the part that checks where it goes. The people who suffer most aren't the taxpayers. They're the disabled Australians who depend on the scheme, because every dollar stolen is a dollar that didn't reach someone who needed it. The NDIS was a landmark. When it launched in 2013, Australia became one of the first countries in the world to guarantee individualized disability support as a right, not a charity. 761,000 Australians are on the scheme today. People with cerebral palsy, people with autism, people who need a wheelchair, a carer, speech therapy, or help getting dressed in the morning. 43% of participants have autism as their primary disability. These are children getting early intervention, young adults learning to hold a job, families who waited years for support that finally arrived. Before the NDIS, disability support in Australia was a postcode lottery. Which state you lived in determined what help you got. The NDIS was supposed to fix that, and for hundreds of thousands of people, it did. That's the part you need to understand first. The people who depend on this scheme are real, the need is real, and no serious person is arguing the NDIS shouldn't exist. The question is whether anyone is watching the money. In 2021, the NDIS cost $29 billion a year. By 2025, it costs $46 billion. That's a 60% increase in 3 years. The growth rate when Labor took office was 23% annually. They've brought it down to about 11%. The target is 8% by July 2026. But even at 8%, the scheme is projected to cost somewhere between $93 and $125 billion a year by 2034. At that point, the NDIS would be the single largest line item in the federal budget. Now, how much of that money is being stolen? The NDIA's own estimate, 5 to 10% of outlays are non-compliant, fraudulent, or incorrect. 5% of $46 billion is $2.3 billion. 10% is $4.6 billion every year. The Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission puts it higher, up to $6 billion a year once you include organized crime components. Against those numbers, the fraud task force has recovered $86 million total since it was created in 2022. Drew Pavlou is a political activist. Pete Zagoulas is a YouTube investigator. In March 2026, they published a video that went viral. They'd rented a Sydney Airbnb, left it mostly tidy, a few towels on the floor. Then they called a cleaning company that bills through the NDIS, posing as a participant's carer. The cleaners arrived without professional equipment. They spent approximately 25 minutes in the property. The invoice was $236. When Pavlou confronted them, the company cited a government-mandated 2-hour minimum. No such minimum exists in the NDIS guidelines. When that was pointed out, they reduced the bill by 90%, effectively admitting to a tenfold overcharge. But it gets worse. In October, the government shut down a provider called M&F Disability Services for fraud. Lifetime ban. The owner owed $722,000 in unpaid taxes. Days later, a new company opened at the same address in Fairfield, Western Sydney. Same phone number, same accountant. It was called Sunny Days Care. When Pavlou and Zagoulas visited the new office to ask about the connection, staff screamed slurs at them, physically assaulted the investigators, and smashed $800 worth of equipment. Within a week of publishing their findings, Pavlou and Zagoulas received over 100 fraud tip-offs from the public. They also received cease and desist letters from the lawyers of the providers they'd exposed. Overcharging cleaners are one thing, Operation Banksia is another. An organized crime syndicate operating across Western Sydney and Adelaide submitted over $40 million in NDIS claims. Hundreds of fake service reports. Claims filed for participants who were in prison at the time the services were supposedly delivered. The Australian Federal Police coordinated the operation. 75 investigators from 6 agencies: AFP, Services Australia, the NDIA, NDIS Commission, State Police Forces, and the Criminal Intelligence Commission. Operation Banksia was part of a broader week of action that disrupted $50 million in alleged fraud across 6 investigations. The NDIS Commission issued suspension notices and banning orders. Since 2022, the Fraud Fusion Task Force has launched 660 investigations, 24 criminal convictions, roughly 200 providers and individuals banned from the scheme. The task force says its total integrity benefit is $3.1 billion. That sounds like a lot, but most of that is projected savings from banning dodgy providers, not recovered cash. The actual money clawed back remains a fraction of the estimated fraud. In August 2024, Parliament passed reform legislation with bipartisan support. The projected savings, $19 billion over 4 years. In April 2026, tougher penalties followed. Maximum fines increased 40-fold, up to $15 million when misconduct leads to death or serious injury. Electronic claim forms, whistleblower protections, new powers to demand evidence before claims are paid. On paper, this is exactly what the scheme needed. But here's the problem nobody wants to say out loud. You cannot slow the money down. Every dollar you delay is a dollar someone in a wheelchair doesn't receive. Every new compliance check is a form that a person with an intellectual disability has to navigate. Every crackdown risks catching the vulnerable alongside the criminal. The minister who built the task force, Bill Shorten, left in January 2025 to become a university chancellor. His successor, Jenny McAllister, calls the fraudsters predators and shonks. The language is strong, but the system that allowed them in hasn't fundamentally changed. The NDIS was designed to say yes. It was designed to be fast, to be generous, to get money to people who'd waited decades for help. That design worked. The money moved. The help arrived. The part that was supposed to check, to verify, to follow up and make sure the money went where it was meant to go, that part was never built. Not properly. Not at scale. Australia's disability scheme went from $29 billion to $48 billion in 3 years. It's heading for 125 by 2034. The fraud task force has recovered $86 million. Against a $48 billion annual spend, that is not a rounding error. It is a rounding error of a rounding error. A man with a hidden camera films a cleaner charging $236 for 25 minutes. A company shut down for fraud in October reopens in November with a new name, the same phone number, and the same accountant. And the program that funds all of it continues to grow, because the people who need it, and there are hundreds of thousands of them, have nowhere else to go. That's the thing about a program this size. You can't just shut it down. You can't slow it down either, because every dollar you delay is a dollar someone in a wheelchair doesn't receive. So the money keeps flowing, and the fraud keeps flowing with it, and the gap between the two gets wider every year. The NDIS isn't broken because bad people found it. It's broken because it was built to be fast and generous, and nobody built the part that checks. If this changed how you see your next receipt, your next bill, your next upgrade, we did our job. Like and subscribe, we have more to show you.